Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode number 315 of the Board Game Barrage podcast. I am your host, the Orange Tank Neelan, and with me are these two fine gentlemen. Mark, the red... Nope, that's not right. Mark, the green tank, and Kellen, the red tank.
You would think after 300 goes,
Yeah.
you would know. But if we remember, Mark originally wanted to be red, and he was outvoted. I can't remember why. What rights did I have, Mark? The Instagram account?
Yeah, I think you were the originator, so I gracefully bowed out.
It's an IQ
I also
thing.
did that as a clean edit, so we could have just cut around it, and no one would have been the wiser, Kellen, but now you've ruined it.
What's a clean edit?
I left a gap, and then I started again. It was perfect.
Mark, have I ever gave you a clean edit?
Never in your life.
That's right. Thank you, Mark.
This week on the show, we are now 1 month away from Essen SPIEL in Germany.
It's preview time.
That we won't be going to.
We will not be going to Essen.
And in fact, we have never gone to.
We have yet to go to Essen.
I have no interest.
But we're still going to talk about
in
it.
Fact.
Yeah, not bothered, quite frankly.
That's right.
Germany, But we're going to talk about it. That's where all the best games come out every year. That's what we're told. People go to Essen, they come back with bootloads of games that are yet to be released in the US. It's mad exciting. We're going to be talking about the games that we've been looking over on the Board Game Geek preview list and letting you know what we're excited to hear people talk about, I guess, or at least get early impressions of ahead of Essen SPIEL.
And with no accountability. Like
with no
absolutely
accountability.
zero accountability of ever following up. I think one time we followed up and it was so arduous that we deemed
and embarrassing.
never again.
Yeah. So you can look forward to that in the second half. But before we get there, let's talk about some of the games that we've been playing this week. And Mark's going to be talking to us about Nekojima. I am going to be talking about We're Sinking. And Kellen's going to give us a color double barrel with colorful and Hues and Cues.
Wow.
He's inventing segment names before we can get to them. It's staking a claim, Neil, and I appreciate it.
Let's kick it off with Mark and Nekojima.
Yeah, so I'm sure we'll be talking about in the preview a lot of midweights and heavyweight Euros and all that. So let's take a little break as I discuss Nekojima, which is a dexterity game designed by David Karoma and Karen Nguyen and published by Unfriendly Games. So I usually steer clear of talking too much about the setting or theme of a game, but I'm going to do so here, which might seem strange given, again, the fact that we're talking about a dexterity game and a pretty abstract one at that. But I think it helps internalize the rules and gives you the whole vibe of the game. So Nekojima, which translates to Island of Cats in Japanese, I'm sure Kellen already knew that, you are trying to supply supply electricity to the island of cats as things get more and more cramped due to lack of space, as more and more electrical poles go up, while also dealing with, of course, the local cats. So the way this works is pretty straightforward. There's a relatively small circular disc game board, which you place in the middle of the table, which is divided into 4 quarters, each a different color. On your turn, you're going to be rolling 2 dice that are going to tell you where you need to place the 2 electricity poles on the circular island. So if you roll a red and a green, one pole goes in the red part of the island, the other one goes in the green. If you roll 2 reds, both poles need to go into the red section, for example. You can also roll wilds, which allow you to place the pole wherever you want. Conversely, you can roll the dagger symbol, which allows the player to your right to pick which section you need to place that pole into, which can be brutal and hilarious. After you've done that, you pull a cube out of a bag, which is going to tell you which color of electricity pole you need to place, either red, white, or blue. The difference between the colors is the length of the rope, which acts as like the electrical wire that connects the 2 poles. So red poles are the shortest, have the shortest rope between, while blue have the longest. This length of electricity line matters because you aren't allowed to, A, touch the rope with your hand because you're electrocuting yourself, theoretically. B, have the rope, aka electricity line, from the pole that you place touch any previously placed electrical lines or ropes, as the theme goes. Or C, have any electrical line touch the ground. So you have to make sure that the lines don't touch any other lines and don't touch the ground, and that you never touch any of the lines. Furthermore, if as you're pulling out that cube from the bag, instead of pulling a red, white, or blue one out, you pull a black one out. That allows you to assign this little hanging cardboard cat to one of your opponents, who then need to hang them when it comes around to their turn, which can be pretty difficult when things are precarious during the middle of the game. A pretty funny thing about the cardboard hanging cats is that they're all pretty uniquely shaped, and it's really funny when someone wants to give you one of the really fat cats, and you're just pleading with them like, okay, I know you're going to give me a cat, just don't give me that cat. Like, there's one that's especially sort of long and wide that nobody wants to have. This all keeps going until, as you probably guessed, someone knocks down the power lines, in which case they lose and everybody else wins. So you've got a cockroach poker situation going on there. A couple quick words about the electrical poles themselves. They're like these wooden cylinders, and they're all of sort of random shapes. So in the red section of poles, the red length, the shorter ones, you could have two poles that are very short, one that is long, one that is short. They also need to be of mixed sizes. Yes. So is a poll joke coming up? Is a poll joke?
No, but you said they're electrical poles, right? We could run this back. You said just a few words about the electric poles. Yes. And then now you've been talking to us about the electric poles. Again, I'm not going to get into it's been more than a few words. My question is,
sure.
Why did you announce that you were going to do a few words on the electric poles instead of just, talking about your few words about the electric poles?
Because the poles themselves need to be brought to light. I'm specifically talking about the poles themselves, not about how they function during the course of the game, but the actual physical poles themselves, which I think need some remarking about.
Okay, so I'm just wrong, and I need
physical.
to stop.
Yes.
All
the
right,
physical
so
properties.
We're cutting it
because
right?
when I tell you electrical poles, you think like, oh, they're all standard electrical poles, right? I could see in your eyes, you're thinking, oh, these are all the same. No, they're not. They come in very different sizes. And also, one aspect of the game that I haven't mentioned is that because the circular cardboard board where you're placing all these poles is relatively small, as I mentioned, you run out of space very, very quickly, and you can place the electrical poles on top of previously placed poles, so you can have them moving vertically, which is interesting, and that's where the different size poles come into account. I really, really enjoyed this. It was really simple to teach, also very welcoming. I played this with the group that I play with normally, a group that we normally play, heavy midweight games, and this was so approachable and fun looking that Roselle, who usually stays away when it comes to my game nights, because we're talking about converting ore to oil or all this stuff, she could find it intimidating. She jumped right into a couple of games of this, and everybody had a great time, the heavy gamers and non
Did you tell her a few words about the electrical poles, and she was all
I did. I made sure before we got into it to describe the electrical poles in great detail. But dexterity games are, when done well, can be very fun and inviting and can appeal to anyone, and I think that this game works on that level. It can also be, depending on how hard you're playing it. We had a couple times in the game where somebody would roll double daggers, which means the person to the right could assign where both of their poles were placed, and those just became really funny moments where there was again pleading or cajoling by the rest of the table, no, make them place both of them into green, really get them, that kind of thing. So a game I hadn't heard very much about, but really surprised me by how good it turned out. So a game that I'm definitely looking forward to playing in the future, and I definitely recommend Nekojima, which is, again, designed by David Carmona and Karen Wen and published by Unfriendly Games.
Very cool. I'm going to be talking about a game called We're Sinking. This is a semi-cooperative, is maybe not quite right, but that's at least a good entry point. It is a game where you are all pirates aboard a pirate ship, and at the outset, you're being attacked by a sea monster and taking on water, and you're trying to do a few things. You're trying to repair the holes in your ship. You're trying to bucket water off the side of the ship. You're trying to repair breaches. You're trying to repair your cannons. You're trying to fire those cannons at the sea monster with the aim towards defeating the sea monster before your ship sinks all the way down. If you do that, if you all collectively manage to defeat the sea monster, then whoever comes away with the most points in cards is the winner. But that's only one of the ways the game can end. If instead the game ends by the ship sinking, then whoever is holding the least number of cards in their hand. So sort of counteractive win conditions based on whether the game is going one direction or the other. So there's almost a little bit of a okay, I'm going to be helping this as long as it seems like we're winning, but when the thing starts to turn, or if I'm going to deliberately try to make this turn so that we start sinking, I wouldn't be the person carrying the fewest cards in the process. Which is a really fun dynamic, because you have these sort of lines starting to be drawn between people that are trying to help and trying to hurt the ship. At the very beginning, there's a sort of like cooperative nature, but then there's some people can be lying about the actions they're taking or to steal treasure, and so on. The way that this kind of all plays out, there's a very strict process to the way that the turns break down, but the most important thing is that everyone has a little secret dial that they can choose one of those 4 main actions, whether that is bucketing out water or pillaging treasure, which is just a purely selfish action, repairing the breaches, or firing the cannons. You choose your dial in secret, you place it face down, and then there's a reveal. If someone was lying, they move their marker to the lowest point of another column, which is usually the best spot to be in. So there is like incentive and advantage to be the person that lies. There's a little bit of like a double bluff element, because if everyone decides to steal treasure, then usually what ends up happening is that no one gets any treasure. So there's a little fun dynamic there of that sort of think and double think about where you're going to go, when you're going to turn on the crew, when you're going to help out, communication about who's going to help do this. Do we have enough people bucketing water this turn? Do we have enough people repairing stuff this turn? All those little fun, like, social play dynamics are kind of all in play here. It also just kind of has this very lovely, vibrant art style and this cool toy factor with, like, this, plastic ship that comes apart in sections as if it's actually sinking into the water, revealing new treasures that come out during play. There's a whole host of cards that are, like, some combination of either just different treasures or special items. Everyone has like a unique item that's special to them, but it's a very simple, pretty silly game, truth be told, but one that I've now had a great time with 2 completely different groups. I sort of broke this out both with my regular, heavy board gaming group and with super casual, non-hobbyist gamers.
Idiots.
And both times it's hit really, really well. Say again?
What?
What? Yeah, this is one I think that we would probably have a fair bit of fun with, although it does have a heavy dose of just kind of, like I said, silliness. Like when you're attacking the sea monster, you're rolling dice. Very often those last couple of turns, I will say that to the game's credit, this game in both times I've played it has come down to that very crucial, will we be able to pull this off right at the end? And you have some people that are very much like hoping that die roll doesn't go one way, some people hoping it will go the other way. But I will say that a die roll, there is a very big contingent factor in this game that does hinge on, are you going to hit that sea monster in that last desperate attack or not? And if you're not okay with that, then you're not okay with that. Like that's one of the things you sort of have to be okay with in this type of game. But it doesn't overstay its welcome, and I had a great time with it. Super recommend We're Sinking.
The fact that it's ended both times for you in this like crescendo moment at the end, is that a function of how the game is designed, or just do you think things fell into place in your games?
I think it's probably a little bit of both. I think that it could exceedingly be the fact that it was just, a stroke of luck both times. Yeah. I can absolutely see the scenario. And in fact, I don't think the game would necessarily work if it always came out that way. Yeah. There will be times where it just goes horribly wrong from the outset or vice versa. But yeah, I think the thing that's clever about it is that depending on whether it's about to turn into a victory or a fail ending, if you interpret it both those ways, you have to be hedging your bets a little bit with the cards, because you're either trying to accumulate cards to get points or shed cards in order to like have a few at the end. So you never want to swing too hard in one direction or the other. So there's always some contingent of like trying to play both sides a little bit until it's very clear which way you want to push it, which I think is just smart.
Yeah.
So I think it kind of self-balances a little bit by design. But yeah.
I mean, the toy factor alone makes it very inviting.
Yeah, it's delightful. Like I will say that there's one little sort of production issue that seems to be widespread where the ship doesn't quite fit together properly, but they are doing their best to try to resolve that and send out replacement ships or fixes to people, which to their credit. But yes, that visual of taking off the bottom layer of the ship and just watching it sink lower and lower into the water is just incredibly cute. But that is We're Sinking.
Is there anything else in your life that would be made better with a toy factor? You know what I mean?
Is there anything else in my life? Everything.
Isn't it
everything.
A weird sentence, like the toy factor alone? I don't know. I think I'm just down on Mark today. It's like it strikes me as such a weird sentence. Like, Mark, do you have other toys? Again, no problem if you do, but you don't, because I've been to your house.
Yeah, some games I have toys.
All your games are your toys.
No, I'm saying in my games, some have toys.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, think about that.
Well, Now it's my turn to speak a few words about color. And what is the name of this new segment, Neelan?
It's the color double barrel.
The color double barrel. So
Well, I'm changing it now, sorry. Retroactively changing it to the color double bubble.
Double bubble. Okay, well, it's still better than Mark's names for different segments of the show. The color double bubble face off. I have had the opportunity over the past month or so, for whatever reason, to play 2 games, both about color, back to back, a few different times. Those 2 games being Hues and Cues and Colorful. And I want to be the guy that tells you need to own Colorful and not Hues and Cues. And the problem here is that Hues and Cues is quite the looker of a board game and has a very distinct table presence. Hues and Cues is a color game where someone gives you a clue based on a giant board with a lot of colors on it. We've covered it on the show before. So essentially it's like I'm thinking of a carrot, and then everyone has to use their little tokens, I guess, or their player pawns to figure out what shade of orange you mean when you say carrot. So it's a very visual game, but all the fun of the game of Hues and Cues I have just described to you. Okay? Scoring, daft. The sort of everyone gets to place 2 things, daft. It has no real social sense except when you reveal at the end and then everyone goes, "That's not the color of a peach." And then everyone kind of has a little laugh about that. Whereas in the game Colorful, what you are doing is everyone is assigned a category and you have 10 color cards, and then you have to give a clue that will get everyone to put down the same color card. And I have had just the most riotous fun. For instance, we'll do it right now, okay? Mark and Neelan, I'm going to count down from 3, and you'll say the color that you most associate with Coca-Cola. 3, 2, 1.
Red.
All right. See, you guys would be matching. We'd be good. But not if you had played with my group of 6 people, of which black was chosen by someone.
That's fair. I was debating it.
Brown was chosen by 2 people.
Questionable.
And then the rest were... Brown is questionable, but black isn't?
Yeah. I mean, I guess it's probably closer to dark brown, but I just think of the color of Coke as black. I don't know.
Do you?
Yeah.
No, okay, well, this is fascinating. Yeah. So did this player at the table, because to me it's like brown, like the idea that a soda is black. Mark, do you consider Coca-Cola black?
I mean, look, oh my gosh. Why is this such a hard question to answer? I think that if you see a glass of cola, it does look black. But
more black than brown.
I would say yes.
Do you wear glasses?
But I will concede that if it's like a thin layer of Coke, then it's clearly brown.
I see. So the thicker the Coke, the blacker the Coke.
The blacker the juice.
So, I mean, it's obviously red, so the 3 of us would be on the same wavelength and have passed through that round. But what happens is you play 5 or 6 rounds of this in a row, but the problem is that if someone has f***ed up in an earlier round, they're about to realize that when the category becomes famous dinosaurs and someone says Barney, and literally one person bursts out laughter and starts groaning because they already used their purple card for Coke for some strange reason, because they also need glasses. And the goal state is just a perfect cooperative game. What I will say is I get Hues and Cues. I get the allure because I did this work board game night and I was like, oh my God, Hues and Cues would be perfect. We do a lot of design work at Activision. Oh my God, this is going to be perfect. I don't own it. But I do have Colorful. I brought it in. Hit of the night, I tell you. Absolutely just amazing games. It just feels like you end up getting into more funny discussions in Colorful, despite it being obviously on the face of it a lot less alluring from the outside. So that is why the first ever double bubble color bubble
color double bubble color.
Well, but it has to go on if we do these head-to-heads. Anyway, we're firing Hues and Cues.
Firing away.
No. Mark, it's instinct. He's so good at that. You should really seek out Colorful. and be done with Hues and Cues. That's my rant.
Yeah, I'll throw my weight behind Colorful as well. This was so generously, as Kellen reminded us.
No.
We started recording.
So
generously
what?
gifted
Reminded.
Kellen had an extra copy of Colorful, which he gifted to my partner. It comes in a lovely small box, so she at some point carried it with her to take to just a meet where we were just meeting up with her mom and her stepdad, and was very excited to break out. And it went off resoundingly well. Like, it's so easy to teach. Like, they sort of got it after a round, and we're all having fun. And that thing that always happens in Colorful that you just described, where someone knows that they're messed up because they've used the card that someone is clearly cluing towards later in the round, is great. It's great.
Anyway, that's it. Nealon, how dare you do me dirty like this? I had forgotten that I gifted this. I was the generous soul that forgot his own generosity. And now you're saying, you're telling everyone I reminded you before we recorded. Remember that time I gifted this out of my own
Who are
heart?
they going to believe, Calvin?
Yeah, they're going to believe you. That's the problem.
Nealon, I'm going to edit all this out so everybody knows.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mark. So before we move on, one just quick thing in the middle that I wanted to shout out is that someone in our Discord lists us the fact that now you do not have to rely on Apple Podcasts as your sole venue for rating and reviewing the show. And this is something that helps us a lot. It does a lot to promote these things in the algorithms, which puts them in front of more people. So we always appreciate when people leave us kind reviews and ratings. Supposedly, you can now do this through Pocket Casts on Android, which, is certainly my preferred Android podcast app. And if you're not already using it for podcasts, I would highly recommend it. And that is another venue for which you can rate it in a way that will promote it to other podcast users more prominently. So thank you for having that pointed out to us. So there's another venue for you to rate the show if you would be so kindly inclined to do so. We would hugely appreciate that. Unless you're going to leave us less than 3 stars, in which case, don't bother. Okay, let's get into the feature topic.
Essen
SPIEL.
Preview 2024.
Preview.
It's in Germany this
World
time.
premiere.
But we're never going to go.
We're never going to go.
Never going to go. Never have been. Not interested.
Never want to.
Yeah.
Never. Not
No
interested.
plans. Yeah. We are going to do this in a top 5 format, going around the room in the beloved order, the always order of KNM.
All right.
Say it with us. KNM.
KNM. Is this actually
Kicking
what
off.
it always is?
Nope.
That's what it always
But
is.
I'm going to pretend it's whatever it's convenient
got
for
it.
the episode in any given
Perfect.
moment. Kellen, kick us off with your number 5 game.
All right. So going through this list, coming up with games, it's always exciting. It's fun to try to get yourself hyped. There's a little bit of the how much do we know about a game versus, the more we know, sometimes the less exciting it is. That has real world parallels, basically with all people that I meet, I would say. But especially true with board games. My number 5 is a Martin Wallace game. And I find he is so hit or miss, but I keep wanting to take the chance with Mr. Wallace. Mr. Wallace, who brought us A Study in Emerald 2nd Edition. Mr. Wallace, who brought us Brass, Lancashire, not Birmingham, you Care Bear noobs. We've only been playing board games for 2 years. How's that for gatekeeping? He has a new game coming out called, and again, this is an upside. If you can't pronounce the title of the game, but it doesn't have a semicolon and in it, that's an upside. Æterna? It's like the letter A-E. Is there a name for that letter?
Probably.
Smart people? You're both in
I don't know it.
It's an
All right, well, is it?
No.
Okay. Æterna is a new game that is some kind of mix of card drafting, worker placement, probably with some area control going on. It looks heavy, but it looks beautiful. And I always like how interlocking his heavier games are, like Brass and like other games, Bloodstones. I don't know that that's a good example of what I'm talking about, but he's released so many good games. On the list of designers I will always want to try his game. I would never say no when someone said, hey, you should check out this Martin Wallace game. There are other Martin Wallace games also coming out at Essen. It is a little bit of a flyer. The rule book exists for this one, but I refuse to read rule books for quarter of the games I do own, so I'm not going to dive too deep here. But that is Æterna, and let us know how you pronounce this one.
That symbol is called an ash, apparently, the AE.
Interesting.
Ash?
This also, yeah, apparently. This looks stunning as well, by the way. The way that the board and the colors of the pieces is a very, very cool presentation. Yeah, this one was one that caught my eye for sure as well.
Same here. And like Kellen said, like anytime there's a Martin Wallace game, I'm at least going to be interested, obviously.
For sure.
Like just always unique designs.
My fifth entry on my list, I don't know, this is kind of just more of a tradition at this point. My fifth entry is kind of like a little bit of, just kind of like an unsure avant-garde, could be cool, could be con. The one I know the least about and could be terrible, who can say, is Babylon. This is I hesitate to call it a city builder, but you're certainly building like a 3D structure. Like at the outset, it has this appearance of a thing that you see very little in games, reminiscent a little bit of Monero, where you have this sort of, escalating 3D structure you're building. This is not a cooperative game like that is, though. This is a competitive game where you are building your structure in the style of the Hanging Gardens of Babylon on your little board. And there's an element of interaction in this that is subtle, but I think is quite lovely, which is that you are collecting terrace tiles from this board in the middle, which come in triple stacked layers. So presumably, and it's hard to tell exactly, I've not read the rules super in depth, but the tiles get better towards the bottom. So if you take the top tile from any given stack, that's cool for you, but you're exposing a better tile to the other player. So there's this trade-off of when you're going to dig deeper down that layer in order to get tiles for yourself while rewarding future players ahead of you with better tiles. There's also some trade-offs based on where the tile is positioned that will give you certain rewards, such as these pillars and steps and terraces and plastic pieces, because heck, if we're talking about toy factor, then this game has it in spades. This is this almost gaudy structure of plastic and cardboard that sort of appears out of your board as you're starting to assemble it in a way that I think looks quite lovely. It also seems like fairly snappy at about 45 minutes. Cute looking game. Hope it's good. Babylon.
Going from a game with a high toy factor like Babylon, I'm going to go in the other direction and pick a game that I'm surprised that Kellen didn't scoop me as we compared lists before the show, because this is a Sashi and Sashi game, Bus and Stop. So I've gone through the rulebook. This is a really simple set collection sort of pick up and deliver game with the, classic Sashi and Sashi ease of play, ease of description, ease of teaching. Also with the same art style that you had in other Sashi games, like In Front of the Elevators and Photograph and all that. Not a super complicated game, but just another pleasant, well-designed, easy-to-play card game from Sashi, who are, fantastic card game designers. So a simple game, plays in 15 minutes. Again, set collection, pick up and deliver, that I'm excited to try.
Yeah, this is definitely on the list for me. I think all of these games are absolutely worth trying. It just gets to the point where when you have like a singular mind and a singular like style and I'm making set collecting games, it becomes like an exercise of like I probably want 3 of them.
Yeah,
I don't know. And again, it's worth checking out, so it's not a knock. It's like, it's just like I have Photograph, I love it. I have Let's Make a Bus Route, I love it. And I have In Front of the Elevators, and I'm okay with it. So it's like where does it fit in there? But if the hype gets hype, then it's like I'm all on board and would absolutely seek out a copy.
Gotcha. Yeah, makes sense.
It's me, yeah?
Yeah.
For the K and M, this is the K coming at you with number 4. This one is a bit of a cheat, as I think it's actually not going to get kickstarted until now. It's a little light but it's in the Essen preview, and I'm all jazzed about it. I like looking at the little guy and fighting for it. So this is COSCA, Take Over the Mafia. So a few points down for having the colon and Take Over the Mafia, but that's okay. But I saw this Mafia themed for whatever reason. I'm not drawn to out of the theme. I haven't even seen The Godfather. Is that Mafia themed?
What?
It is. I'm shocked you haven't seen The Godfather.
You haven't seen The Godfather?
The Sopranos, that's The Godfather themed, right?
Not in the classical sense, but yeah.
I've seen Casino.
God,
how about that?
Okay, that's fine.
I haven't seen Heat, but I want to. I wasn't born, okay?
I wasn't either.
Okay, this is not relevant, okay? I know a lot about... Anyway, what I like about this theme for games is the sort of fun silliness that it brings in games like Nothing Personal and a few other sort of Good Critters-esque. Again, that adds the furry component, but we could forget about that. In this game, there are a couple of things that I really like. One is that you are using dice to bid for things, and you're secretly bidding and then revealing all at once and then taking turns. And someone in a playtest review, described it as quite unforgiving in the way that these resolve, as in, like, you can get, which, again, when you describe, like, a Mafia game as a strategic party game, that type of reveal with huge stakes in a short hour-long game, I'm all on board with it, right? And then the other mechanism that I find so weird is that the game is played over 7, like, days, okay? And each day has modifiers. But the way that you play the game is you start on the day of the week that it is in real life.
That's
so, cool. Like, which effects are in play, will change based on if you start the game on a Friday or if you start it on a Tuesday. And again, obviously there's so much room for that to be, like, stupid. But, like, I hope the Friday, Saturday, Sunday are the best versions of when to start this game. But again, hour-long game, fun theme, described as like a strategic party game with secret bidding. Like, this just all screams like something that Kellen would be interested in. The Mafia theme, again, I could really take or leave, but I think it just helps sort of sell this vision for me as something that may attempt to reach out to try to get a preview copy, just because I feel like this is one that we would all play and just like scream at each other and have a fun time. That is COSCA, COSCA, Take Over the Mafia.
My number 4 game is, of all the games on my list, probably the most Euro game that I have, which is Galileo Galilei. This is coming from a designer called Thomas Holek, it was interesting to me on this list for having 3 games that all seem to be in quite high anticipation, all in Essen SPIEL, and no priors. Like, he's like bursting onto the scene, is doing some collaborations with CGE, and is supposedly doing some cool stuff. Galileo Galilei is a game with like a 16th century astronomy theme, like as the name might suggest. You are going to be playing as one of these historical astronomers, like either Galileo, Kepler, Copernicus, in a game where you have typical for this sort of Euro game, this action selection puzzle where you are spending a resource to go along this arc, take an action. Those actions are all on theme in the sense of like you're observing the night sky, you're recording your findings, giving lectures on those things. But one of the things that's quite neat, which I think is quite a cool addition, is there's this inquisition, where as you're making these findings, you're attracting inquisitors, and you have to sort of use an appropriate amount of your time to persuade them or suffer the consequences. So there's like this antagonistic neutral element that everyone's competing with. One of the other things I thought was really cool is every player in the game, each one of those astronomers, has like a quite heavy asymmetric element, which strikes me as Marco Polo-esque, a completely different minor rule set and components that are unique to them that accounts for like a little bit of a sort of a separate sort of mini game type component that they're wrestling with in addition to the other stuff going on, which I thought was kind of a cool way to handle that sort of asymmetry in a Euro game. And yeah, I think the theme on this is lovely. The art looks great. It's definitely one that speaks to me in terms of how it seems to be marrying the thematic and strategic elements. Super interested to check out Galileo Galilei.
And from one Thomas Holek game to another, my number 4 is another of his designs. This is SETI, Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence. This is another game by CGE, and this, relatively hot designer and also a game by CGE are two things that interest me right off the bat. The extraterrestrial SETI theme also helps. It seems to be like a rotating circular board representing space that appears to be interesting. Also has sort of terraforming Mars / Ark Nova-ish vibes to it because it's got a deck of like 200 cards, and it seems like you can play cards to do a bunch of different things. So maybe that style of game, I'm not exactly sure. But Ark Nova's a game that has grown on me. CG always comes out with interesting designs. Holek seems to be an interesting designer. The shifting circular board seems like it could be an interesting design choice. So just a lot of interesting things that caught my eye. So that's SETI, Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence.
The K speaks again. My third game that I am most looking forward to coming out of Essen is a Friedman Friese game. Again, the allure of Friedman Friese cannot be overstated. This one is a double-double for me. Because it's a trick-taking game, guys. And Lord knows we don't have enough of these in our lives. They're like, I don't know, apples. So you stay away from the doctor. Right?
Yeah, that's how the saying goes. Yeah.
This...
Have an apple to stay away from the doctor. That's what I say. That's what we say. That's what my dad said to me, and that's what I said to my son.
I just struggle to relate to people. This game is called Fishing, and it is a trick-taking game. It has a relatively simple twist that I'm sure has existed somewhere else. I have not seen it. I am, despite what you may think, podcast listeners, only an intermediate apple eater. There are those who only eat apples. But in this one, every card that you win is worth a point, and that becomes your hand for the next round. But the players who don't win enough cards to have a full hand are drawing cards from a deck of like extra power cards that are more powerful, that contain trump cards, that contain other stuff that has wackier powers. So as you lose hands, ostensibly you're not getting enough points. You're losing points, but you're getting better cards with which to fight with in the future. So it looks relatively straightforward. I do actually like the art on this. Normally, I would say I'm not a fan of Friedman Friesa's, like, I make everything green herder thing. But in this case, like, I'm feeling it. I'm feeling the art. Game's called Fishing. It's called Fischen in Germany. So I'm excited to pick this one up. Easy buy for me when available.
We can only hope that it's another successful card game from Friesa like Fancy Feathers, right?
Mark, do you know that I went all in on that and bought like 3 copies? Because each box only was 2 players, but I wanted to play it. Like, Mark.
They got you. Friesa got you.
Yeah, he got me,
That
but he also made
bastard got you.
Fuji Flush. Fuji
No, it's true.
Flush.
Look, I know.
That's what I thought you were
Friesa.
going to say. I thought we were having a
Friesa.
genuine human moment, but instead
No.
you took the low road. Low
That's
blow. Right. Wow, Fancy Feathers. All right, let's keep going.
My number 3 game is a game called AI Space Puzzle. This is a limited communication cooperative game where one person is playing as like a ship AI on board a ship where everything is going wrong. You need to, as the ship AI, convince the other players, not convince them, you need to guide them towards doing what they need to do to repair the ship. But like games of its type, in the vein of something like a Hanabi, you can't talk as the ship AI. So all you can do is signal to the other players what they need to be doing. This is a scenario-based game, which is to say that the game has a series of prescribed setups. So like, okay, you're only able to use these specific icons, and these icons come in the form of chits that like designate colors, locations, but very crucially, they're not very specifically coded to your objectives. They're a little bit more abstract. So depending on how you use them, how you lay them out, you can kind of develop your language with your players in order to point them to, okay, we need to have one person in this room, one person in this room. You need to have this tool. The person who has this object needs to be over here at a certain point. And you kind of keep going over a series of 10 rounds based on how they're interpreting your advice in order to get them towards the specific objective that only you as the ship AI knows. It's a pretty unique gimmick that I kind of just love the idea of. It seems like a very simple, very easy to break out game. It's also like kind of like a return from Portal Games, which is like a publisher who I've not felt very inclined to engage with in a long time. So it's cool to see them sort of back on the scene with something I'm excited to check out. That is AI Space Puzzle.
My number 3 game is a return to Martin Wallace. This is, I think, the first Martin Wallace trick-taking game that I am aware of. This is called Zero to Hero. There's not too much information about it. I will say that the big draw for me was the fact that it's a Martin Wallace trick taker. I'm a little done with trick takers, but I'm definitely willing to give Martin Wallace a try when it comes to trying his hand at it. Again, not too much information about it. There is some aspect where, so you win or lose points on each trick, and second place can also win or lose points depending on how the suits come out. So it's not necessarily like a must follow game. Maybe it's just whatever suit is the strongest conceivably, I guess, will win points or whatever. But it has an interesting twist to it, which is that if you're doing really badly and you don't really have a path to win, if you end your hand with 0 points and then win the next hand, I guess, with 5 or more points, which I guess would be a big win, you immediately win the game. So there is an avenue to sort of shoot the moon or go, as the title of the game is, 0 to hero. So again, not too much information about it, but I like the idea of like a game with a built-in shoot the moon insta-win strategy, and I'd be interested to see what Martin Wallace's take on Trick Takers looks like.
This is the one where his take on Trick Takers is using like triangles instead of cards.
Yeah,
right?
there's some sort of tile aspect to
There's
it.
no
yeah,
cards in this trick taking game. There's triangle tiles.
Yeah,
So that's the twist.
that's another twist.
Oh, that's
twists on twists.
Look at but Mark, look at this. I just showed you an admin. Look at the tiles.
Yeah, that's another twist.
You're done with
chips.
Trick Takers, but this has brought you back.
Yeah, look, this is weird.
Okay. All right, yeah, okay. I support you. My number 2, is The Gang. And I think this may have come out at Gen Con, or at least a lot of people were playing at Gen Con, so there's some buzz. There's buzz going in my head. When Cosmos puts out a game called The Blank, that they're clearly echoing the mind or the game, they're saying, okay, other companies are just trying to trick you and like say, oh, this is like that. These guys, they're not tricking you. They have another banger on their hands. This has been described to me as Texas Hold'em meets the mind cooperatively. Okay? So what that means is some cards go out in the middle, you get your secret cards, and then you have these tiles with which to attempt to communicate with your other players about who's going to have the best hand. And you're trying to relatively rank hands. So if someone immediately grabs the I've got a shitty hand tile and puts it in front of them, but if 2 people want that, you have to sort of, without using words, decide who has the worst hand and sort of evaluate that together. This is apparently possible to play like with just a standard like deck of cards and a few other materials, but the reviews are extremely promising coming out of Gen Con. But a little bit of you have to know poker. Again, it's a small box card game, plays around with the social space for me. This is just always going to be a winner for me. It just feels like something I'm going to like. Obviously, the barrier of entry being like you have to understand the relative value of poker hands and stuff like that, and that isn't usually my favorite, even like going all the way to like, I don't know, Battle Line when I'm sort of like, did this have to be poker hands? But they used the blank. One word. I'm in the gang.
My number 2 most anticipated game is Golden Cup. I've mentioned a lot on the podcast how much I love challengers, so I was excited to see not 1, but 2 or more perhaps other auto battler style games in the vein of challengers, but I couldn't help but notice that one of them has Simone Luciani, of all people, attached to them, and that is Golden Cup. I have just been frantically skimming the rulebook, which was not available at the time I put this list together, so I have a slightly better sense of what this was before I even added it to my list. But to hear Simone Luciani describe it, it is not deck building, it's tableau building with bag building components. It's a little bit more complex, has an economic part, more choice, and different ways to resolve the matches. One of the things I've been able to ascertain that's quite neat about it is in any given match, unlike challengers where you are just resolving your decks alternating fashions, you're going to take all of your team composition and throw it all into one bag with the opponent on any given match, and then draw tiles from that one at a time. So it does have that thing that challengers have where the order that these things come out is important, but crucially, one thing that seems to be quite different is I do think that challenges sometimes hinges too much on the very specific order that things come out, whereas your players on your team seem to stick around and contribute based on the tableau cards you have in your hand towards attacks, and at the end of a match, whoever's pieces are in majority is the person that's going to win the match. So it does seem like it has that slight Luciani twist in like stabilizing the rules a fair bit in a way that seems fun, while still having that magic of build your team, throw them all into a bag, shenanigans, see who wins, which is just a format I love, that everyone playing a 1v1 match against each other simultaneously. I love that. I'm looking forward to Golden Cup.
Every word you said feels like an upgrade to challengers to me.
Yeah, exactly, right?
But I will say I did not think that the artwork could get worse than challengers. But Golden Cup may take the crown. Yeah.
The cup?
Well, the cup's fine, but like look at the art on the characters on the board and The
Yeah,
cup,
it's very
the cup,
it's
like, would you ever use this as key art? Just a cup on the middle of your box?
it certainly doesn't look as vibrant in that sense as Challenges does, which is fair. That is a little bit of a bummer. But yeah, hopefully it makes up for it in mechanics.
So one thing that at least I look for when I'm making up these lists of like games to preview are, innovative games or games like Zero to Hero, maybe games from designers that I know but that seem to have an interesting twist.
And
that
new
is
penchant for triangles instead of cards.
Exactly. Breaking the mold. That is not so much the case with my next game, my number 2 game, Black Forest, which I was drawn to not because of how innovative it looked, but how cozy and how familiar it was. This is an Uwe Rosenberg game that has a lot of green, that has resource wheels a la Glass Road. And I mean, look, not all of Uwe's pastoral games work for me, but I'm always interested. I always feel good when that box opens up and I see all that green and I see those resources and I just know that I'm in the hands of a master. This is being sold, given the fact that they have the resource wheels that were made popular in Glass Road. This is being touted as a combination between Glass Road and maybe Agricola, insofar as Glass Road was like a simultaneous action selection, whereas Agricola's worker placement. So it's got the resource wheels of Glass Road and the worker placement of Agricola. It's got buildings you have to build and resources you have to convert. It's got all that stuff. It's not necessarily, at least at first perusal, not breaking any, ground. But I am a sucker for Uwe green games where you're building things up and making room and doing all that kind of stuff, converting resources. You have a lot of games now that are midweight Euros that do this kind of stuff that I can play once and then I'm done with. But when it's Uwe, I'm willing to give it a closer look and give it a couple of tries. So Black Forest, the latest pastoral game by Uwe Rosenberg, also co-designed by Tito Lorenz, who I'm not familiar with, is my number 2 game.
I will admit, Mark, that this should have been a shoe-in for my list, but when I saw the Glass Road comparisons, which I find so boring, I could not stand Glass Road to the extent that put me off of including this on mine. But I hope that it is just the resource wheel mechanic and not a lot of the other meat of Glass Road that makes into this, because that at least is a little bit novel.
Well, a big difference between this and Glass Road, of course, is like I said, the fact that it's not simultaneous action selection and it is worker placement. So, but yeah, I get that.
I'll always be in try new Uwe anyway.
Yes,
so
sure,
it was just that one thing that was making me clear.
Do you guys subscribe to the sort of Quentin Tarantino theory, and I don't want to like put words in his mouth, but I will because he's weird, about like how he only wants to make 10 movies and then he's done. And so he's like, again, I think he might be going a little bit too far, but he's also like, I don't want to waste my 10th on like something dumb. And so do you think with that framework in mind that like Uwe does something to his own legacy when you just like look at the amount of them that exist, and like with sort of, you sort of take a 30-year view or a 50-year view and it's like only one of these might matter, I suppose. Again, but we could have fun with all of them. I'm curious how you think about this.
It's an interesting philosophical question. I think that I'm fine with the prolific releases because, like, imagine if Uwe only released his best games. Like, of course, that would be, like, sort of ideal, but we'd always be wondering, what did we not get? You only get one life, so you might as well just release as much as you can. Like, do as much as you can. Like, doesn't mean to like release like all mediocrity, but I'm glad that people who are really good at their craft, when they give us as much as they can, it's like the whole Knizia thing. Like, Knizia has a lot of less than fantastic games, but the ones that are great are amazing. So keep it on.
Yeah, I will say I would tend to agree, if not for the fact that I do have a lot of Uwe games that I think are truly excellent. So like, yeah, despite the fact that a lot of them, maybe most of them aren't, I do think his legacy is going to be a boatload of fantastic games.
I tend to agree. I just think that like, do you do something weird when the flavor of everything is the same? You know what I mean? And I think it's more philosophical than it is real, and I think that if I had unlimited time, like if I was like a retired person, I would be eagerly awaiting every Uwe release every year. But like as it stands, it's like, well, I got to play the Bat Poop one, and now he wants me to like do this one. I just like, I'm still like excited about Newsfjord because I've only gotten to play it 5 or 6 times or whatever. I don't know. That's not a knock on Uwe by any means. It's just a knock on sort of all the working designers, or I don't know what you call them, the people who are full-time, that like that's what they do, up to and including, the only true and living Dr. Reiner Knizia. My number one most excited for game coming out of Essen has been on my mind for so long because of a few simple ingredients. One, the cover art. Okay? I don't know that I want a battle elephant, a guy with a musket, and a sword, and a guy, I don't know what they call this, a guy on a horseback with a weapon. I don't want this art on my wall because of the subject matter, but I do want the art on my wall because it's so good. This is Battalion, War of the Ancients. Mark, have you seen this cover art?
I have not.
Look at this. Battalion, War of the Ancients. A couple other things you'll notice on the cover. Osprey Games. Okay? They kill it. They kill it every time. Understated production, nice box sizes. They know what they're doing. Okay? And then when Osprey Games is led by Paolo Mori, what do you think you're going to get? You're going to get a winner. Okay? This is some kind of tile-esque war game with carts that can be played as a 2-player game or a 4-player game with bespoke factions that are probably civilizations. The rulebook is not out yet, and the illustrations sort of showing different factions in combat and whatnot are not ultra clear how it's all going to work, but I trust Paolo Mori to have distilled this sort of thing down to something palatable to me. I'm not a war gamer. I recently really enjoyed Bloodstones, which has all the trappings of that, and this feels like even further a distillation. There's just, Mark, I feel like this is a Mark game, actually, frankly, more than it is even a Kellen game, but I was smitten by the cover art, so here we are. I don't know. You guys, you excited for this one?
Yeah, oh yeah. I mean, for what's worth, this seems like extremely annealing game, and like you managed to bump this from my list, in fact, which is I'm very excited for this. Having not even heard about it like until we started to compile this list, because it's it's got the pedigree of Blitzkrieg and Caesar, just excellent small box war game adjacent games, and I'm hearing, at least based on early impressions, that there's a little bit of Undaunted in there, and that blend, like you said, with Osprey that does this really good job of distilling war game like systems down into simplified games. This seems rad. I'm super excited for this.
I don't know. Someone in the rating said the Libertalia designer. And I'm like, really? Are you going to do him dirty like that? He has Dogs of War. Hello. Blitzkrieg. Hello. Come on. I mean, also, we could mention Top Deck, the board game, but I think we best not discuss Ethnos. All right, that's going to do it. Before I insult anyone else, moving on from K signing out, passing to N to give us a few words about his number one game.
My number one game is actually one that I'm surprised it wasn't on your list, Callan. This is Beyond the Horizon, a spiritual successor to Beyond the Sun. But this is like civilization themed. So this is more up my specific alley. Like, it does seem to be civilization themed in the sense of the classic Civilization games and Sid Meier's Civilization video games, in the sense that you have a map, you have leaders, you have tech trees. Of course, that's the thing from Beyond the Sun. The grand thing that Beyond the Sun does way better than most other board games is having this incredible actual tech tree that you are moving around down as you are moving your specific civilization down a specific path in order to be able to expand out on this map, in order to like build your cities, get your leaders, all of that jazz. Not a lot known about this just yet, except that, it does have Dennis Chan on board, who is the original designer of Beyond the Sun. So hopefully it is just a continuation of the excellent work that he started in Beyond the Sun in a way that does seem like super, super up my alley.
This was on my list.
Oh.
And then, no. And then removed from my list. And I'll tell you why. And it's again, it's a Kellen thing, but this design trio is very popular. Adam Hill, Ben Pinchback, and Matt Riddle. And I always see the love for their games. And I kind of get it, okay? Because I really like Fleet the Dice game specifically. And I think Mark Peepmots is also theirs, if I'm not mistaken, or some of theirs.
Pinchback and Riddle.
Yeah, they also have like Wasteland Express Delivery Service, which is I think one of the worst games I've ever played, as well as just a couple of games that I don't personally like, but I also just see the love, and I'm sort of like, what is it about these guys' sort of ethos? Again, it's not a they're all functioning. They just don't always hit for me. So when I saw that it was like, it almost feels like, again, I don't know any of the origins, but it's like, we had this good game, now we're going to do a different game and tie it to that game, which actually feels like a theme of a lot of these games that I was seeing in a way that really annoyed me. It's like, oh, this is a Smartphone Inc. game, except it has nothing to do with Smartphone Inc. and it's a different designer. This is a Power Grid in Space game. There was a couple other ones that I specifically was like, oh, there's the one that might be Mark's number one, which we haven't got to, which is like Hegemony game, except not by the same designer. Anyway, it just felt like a theme that I was annoyed by.
Yeah, and I think that I would be on board for you if it wasn't for the fact that Dennis Chan was involved.
So, of course. Of course. I'm excited. I'll play it with you, and I'd be excited to play it.
And to be clear, that was a lot of my skepticism, and I remember even when I first was made aware of this game way back when there was a question. It's like, does this have anything to do with Dennis Chan, like officially? And like there was some question about that. So my hope is that Hue's closer to Beyond the Sun than something that's like a wholly different design that's just banding on that name. But I guess we'll find out.
Yeah, and I don't want to be too negative or disparaging. I'm genuinely excited to play this, but that was what made me go, am I going to buy this immediately? Question mark.
Makes sense.
So my number one game I primarily put on the list because of the designers. So the designers are Nuno Centitiero, and which is not the right way to say it, I'm sure, and Paulo Soledad. They are the designers who previously have designed 3 very interesting, in my opinion, Euro games. These are Nippon, Madeira, and Panamax. And I'd even add La Stanza to that, which was a much lesser known of their designs. These are 3, again, I guess you could call them Euros, but I'm hesitant to even call them that. They're very unique games that I think are like Euro adjacent. For me, they almost feel like designs that, like, if you asked the Splotter team to design like a more mainstream Euro, they would come up with these kind of games. Like if you ever have played or looked at Nippon, Madeira, or Panamax, everything looks like a standard Euro, but they all play very interestingly. Like I think one thing that's good and bad about board games is that, you know, once somebody starts teaching them to you, you're like, oh, okay, so this plays like that and that plays like that, and you can sort of like get shorthand and know how the game goes. But with their designs, at least to me, they've always struck me as really unique. Like you can't really learn Panamax based on previous games you've played because it just has a lot of very weird or very like unusual game mechanisms. And so despite the fact that I don't know that much about Asian Tigers, my number one game, Asian Tigers, A Story of Prosperity, the 2 designers, I'm always going to be interested in their designs because I know, or at least history has proven, that they're unlike anything else I've played. This is an economic game based on the emerging Asian economies of the 1960s, and it's supposed to be a fairly interactive economic game, so I'm always up for an economic game, and especially if it's interactive. So the design pedigree specifically, but also the theme and the fact that it's an interactive economic game all sort of joins together for a game that I'm interested in. So that is my number one game, Asian Tigers, A Story of Prosperity.
Did you guys have any sort of has-beens? I have a few games I'm not willing to check out or I found really funny. The first one being Stefan Dora jumping in on the name Skull Queen for a game and making it a trick-taking game that has nothing to do with Skull King. I love this because I just find it to be like almost like domain squatting, you know, but Skull Queen, not the Skull King. You know, Grandpa Beck's probably pissed about that. Another one, The King of Tokyo Origins. So a game about learning where the King of Tokyo characters came from. That's not a lot. They already have like King of Tokyo for children, King of Tokyo Duel,
Dark
King
Edition.
of Tokyo After Dark Edition. This is King of Tokyo
adult
Origins, a standalone game. I'm just like, well, who's doing this? Who thought this is Richard Garfield? You're okay with him putting out these year after year, not tarnishing his legacy, Mark?
I have always wondered, like, the rich backstory of the King of Tokyo monsters.
Yeah.
Like, how do they pick Tokyo? Where do they come from? Are they all like aliens? What's going on?
I might actually believe it with you, Mark, so we can leave that in. And then the last one, only because the art is so amazing and like the whole concept, it's called Penguin Airlines. And it is a co-op game where 2 players are penguins running an airline together. But the cover art is literal penguins in an air traffic control tower, like sweating. The idea that like this is about an airline, but they're like, you know what we should add to this is like penguins. And like the whole game is like you have like a real-time air traffic control things that you're moving around that has nothing to do with penguins. But no, we're adding penguins to this one to get everybody interested. And you know what? It worked because now I'm talking about it.
I don't know if I had any that were like steer clears. I did have one that I was too scared to include because it was a solo puzzle game, and I thought I was going to get berated for not.
No,
including
we're
actual
friendly
board games
here.
on my list.
We're good friends.
So in that case, I will shout out Dungeon Exit, which just looks like a either solo or 2-player race logic puzzle game, which I also just thought looked quite lovely.
I got nothing to add because I picked the 5 games that I thought were the best.
The definitive 5 list.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You don't
Makes
need to
sense.
look into any longer.
Yeah, you're a man of few words, right?
That's right.
That they don't miss. Okay.
So we will see you all in Essen. Look for us. You will know us when you see us. Goodbye, everybody. Thank you for listening.
Goodbye.
Oh, I guess I should say thank you to Heart Society for our intro and outro music. What's in your mind, kid? Goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye for real this time.
Can you thank something that is dead?
What is dead men ever die?
Yeah.
Bye.